Well, hey, gents, I think that it's very appropriate today that the three of us are going to talk shop because I find that we have a lot in common. I mean, the three of us, we all have our own training facilities, our own gyms, right here in our homes, under our roofs. We all have kids, mine still lives at home. We've got wives that we got to make sure that we are keeping happy and not aggravating. So I think it's appropriate that we talk shop a little bit about efficiency of training, making sure that we're getting everything that we want to get done, and balancing that with our lives, right? I know for me, myself, I just got a gym membership, believe it or not. It's the first time I've had a gym membership in, it has to be at least 8 years that I've got a gym membership. And it just kind of worked out well, because I like to train in the morning and schedules kind of shifted around a little bit, and the wife sleeps in a lot later, and she does not get very pleased with me when I'm clunking and banging across the hallway in the weight room. So had a little sale on the gym membership, and I thought, you know what? I'm going to go get a gym membership, and I'm just going to go to the gym, and I'm going to train there. I was going to
say something inappropriate, and I think I'm going to leave it at that.
Probably would be best.
I have a 2 and a 3-year-old daughter, so I'm also not going to comment on that last bit there.
I'll let people use their imagination.
Yeah, I'm kind of following you now. But anyways, the point being, I'm working out at the gym in the morning on some days so that I don't bother her sleep schedule, right? So yeah, that's kind of something that I've had to do here recently to get done what I want to get done. But efficiency, getting things so that we can make our lives in balance and still serve the bodybuilding goal, right? So yeah, with that all being said, I mean, this little update from me. We'll continue to talk about that, obviously. But Nick, how about on your end? You having to do anything to keep balance and keep Nick happy and the family happy at the same time?
Yeah, I tell my wife to get the hell out of my way when I have to train.
That goes over pretty well, I bet.
I have to eat 6 times a day. I have to have all my meals prepared in Tupperware, weighed out every day. I come first, my daughters come second. And really, that's the key to being a pro natural bodybuilder, is just completely diving in, because you got to go hard or go home. And if you're not willing to go the distance, why even lift weight in the first place?
Wait. You're going hard, but I don't think you're going home after that.
I'm going hard. Yeah, I'm going somewhere else, not home. I like this topic a lot because it's something that I have seen change in my training since I first got into this stuff. And we were just talking before we started recording. I was about 18 when I dove into muscle and fitness and kind of got into this whole world. And I think back then, there's no need to be efficient. You just, like all of us, we kind of were a bit obsessed in the beginning and very deep in the bro science. And kind of like I said, joking around, that was a lot of our lives, right? We put all that stuff before everything else. So there was no need to be efficient. And I guess you don't have to think about efficiency until you have to. And I think that is with the way goals change in our lives when we move on to different phases of our life, whether it's undergrad, college, or grad school, or marriage, or children, or a new job, anything at all. I think we need to really consider efficiency and how we can trim the fat away, no pun intended, on our programming and on our overall lifestyle, so that we still get the most bang for our buck, but we are able to pursue our other goals and aspirations. So that's definitely something that I have been forced to kind of change. And it happened all for me at the right times. If I got into bodybuilding later than 18, when I was in a different phase of my life, and I had to go through that bro science phase as I'm trying to start a family, or as I'm trying to graduate from college, I feel like it wouldn't have worked. I just feel like there would have been a lot of resistance, and And I don't know how that would have worked out. So for me, I was least efficient when I was able to be. And then I grew in my wisdom, I guess you could say, or knowledge of bodybuilding and more evidence-based, holistic approach kind of that we take here at 3DMJ. I dove into that world, and that became so addicting to learn that kind of knowledge. And so, yeah, I think as I grew and matured as a bodybuilder, I also grew and matured as a person. And they just kind of coincided really nicely in upward trajectory. So, yeah, I think that's kind of my first initial feelings about efficiency when it comes to all this stuff. But Jeff, you what do you think, man? You've been in the game through all different phases and all different decades, and so what's your thoughts here?
Keep the wife happy for sure. That's super important. Make sure there's a lot of clunking going around, right, Brad? That's super important. But no, on a serious note, yeah, it's interesting because my first exposure to like well-structured training, well-structured bodybuilding was back when I was learning about Mike Mentzer's HIIT, Dorian Yates, and all that. So, there's a heavy emphasis on recovery. So it wasn't about like training volume per se, or even frequency. It was like probably not enough frequency, but I didn't follow it exactly as they kind of prescribed it. I kind of found my own like middle ground with it, but it was literally like training 3 days a week was kind of like the sweet spot. Train every other day, make sure that you're training hard, intensity is like kind of high priority, make sure there's recovery. So I was getting that, having a day off in between my training sessions. So you could kind of say I was introduced to efficiency early on because I saw the benefits of that. Like I saw like performance elevating, I seen gains happening, and there was time for other things in life outside of just, the bodybuilding side of things. The only thing is I was obsessive, like you mentioned, Nick. So even though I wasn't in the gym, I was obsessing on bodybuilding anyways, whether I'm just visualizing it constantly or like on my notepad, like writing like my diet, writing training, like keeping notes, just constantly thinking about bodybuilding. But from early on though, just like I had a pretty good sense as far as like what efficiency looked like with my training. And then working at the auto plant, all through my 20s and 30s, I learned about like high volume production because at the end of the day, we were supposed to build X amount of cars. And whenever they needed production to go up, they would either schedule more overtime or they would say, hey, your guys going to work a Saturday, or they would actually speed the line up. So instead of a car coming out, every 60 seconds, now there's a car coming out every 55. And at one point, that line was in the high 40s, low 50s. So you're working faster, harder, and longer. And what I noticed with morale of the workers, just listening to people around me complain about how much they're working and how tired they are, and just you can see people just literally getting burned out. I'm like, this makes no sense. Like, and the quality of the cars were actually diminishing because there was more repairs being done. So to me, I was like, okay, this makes zero sense. Like they're working us to death because they want more output, but you're basically breaking your workforce. The quality just isn't there. So I kind of see in my own training, kind of seeing like how that kind of worked in the real world, especially nowadays where volume is talked about like so much, like we have to do more and more and more. Like to me, it's just like a recipe for inefficiency. And not to mention, as not just from the bodybuilding perspective, but from a human perspective, like say you guys are dads, husbands, just like me, like we don't have a ton of time to be spending in the gym, unless we're going to, be that hardcore bodybuilder and have our wives pissed off because we're not really holding their own at home. So it's just for me, it's like, it's always kind of been there. It's like the supply and demand perspective that I always talk about. And oftentimes what you see kind of being preached out there, to be honest, it's kind of a pet peeve of mine. Like it just frustrates me that volume, more, do more. And we're trying to, get as much out of your bodybuilding as possible. But what's not being taken into account is that we're all human. We all have context. I'm sure there's some people that are out there that don't have as much responsibility. They have more free time. So it's maybe not as much of a stressor, which in a sense, that just means the overall demand isn't high for them. But in the end, it comes down to being able to manage, the supply and demand. And then that's something like what you do all the time, Nick, in your occupation. So it's just, for me, it's just really important that, I should say, I'm glad that we're kind of talking from the human side of it, as far as like trying to make our training as efficient as possible.
That's such a great analogy, Jeff. That is such a great analogy. They're pumping
I'm
out
going to
more
be 52
cars.
in 10 days. So it's I don't got a college degree. I got a little bit of wisdom, I guess, for the years.
So they're pumping out cars in like what sounds somewhere between 20 and 25% less time. But the trade-off for that is that they're burning out their workforce. They're producing cars that are of lower quality, which is then, of course, affecting the consumers that are buying that car, and then overall their name.
Okay. And you ever heard the saying, don't buy a car on Monday and Friday?
Yeah, built on Friday.
Because there's a lot of absenteeism on Monday and Friday. So they're replacing the good worker who knows the job really well with a replacement. So therefore the quality diminishes even more. Well, if you're basically killing people, they're not showing up to work, quote unquote, not showing up to the gym, what are you getting? You're getting inefficiency.
Yeah. And I just think about like how many people try to cram so much volume into a training session because so-and-so says that I need to do this many sets on this day and et cetera, only to have crappy repetitions, crappy effort, and stacking all those upon weeks and weeks and weeks of training. They kind of wonder why they don't have the fantastic physique that Jeff Alberts has, you know what I mean? Or Alberto Nunez, who's training 3 days a week right now, It just kind of all makes sense when you put it into like a more a life applicable type of a circumstance,
There's like a lot of other analogies too. Like I use this, you've heard me, I use the sports world all the time.
Yeah.
Because you look at other sports, it's like they understand performance, right? Like, cause sports it's all about performance.
Performance, yeah, and performing in your sport, yeah.
What usually prevents people from performing really well? Either they're just not recovered, like they're fatigued. Maybe there's a lot of stress there. Maybe they're not eating, enough to support that. But as bodybuilders, we kind of like don't look at it from that supply and demand perspective. We just look at, okay, I gotta try to maximize or optimize my progress. And that oftentimes just means people end up doing more than they probably really need to be doing. Like major league pitchers is always like a great example because, a starting pitcher is not going to pitch every day unless they're only throwing 20 pitches, which isn't realistic as a starting pitcher. So there's a reason why Major League Baseball managers take pitch counts, because they want to make sure they're not getting overly fatigued. And they're in a rotation, so they're pitching every 4 or 5 games. So there's more velocity and there's more control in their pitches. So they're getting that performance because of that recovery aspect. But with bodybuilding, it's like 6 days a week. We got to do, X number of sets a week, like you're saying. And, oftentimes physically, mentally, emotionally, people start getting tapped out. I'm sure you guys talked to some athletes where it's like physically maybe they're kind of hanging on by a thread, but mentally they're like having some resentment towards training. Like, oh gosh, it's a leg day today. I don't feel like training today. Like, with that type of mentality going into the session, like what kind of output are you going to expect? Whereas if I'm coming off a day of rest or 2 days rest and I'm well fueled, like I'm going to get after it. And that leg press, instead of being 450, might be 600. So,
or just like, speaking of efficiency, just don't do 28 sets on the day before, do 15, do 12 sets, and then you can train the next day because you're not overly just fatigued from doing 27 sets, keep doing 12 sets all the time. Then you don't have to do 27 sets on one day. And then you're forced to take 3 days off because you just destroyed yourself, Nick, I'm sorry, I interrupted you. You were just starting to say something. I could see it.
No, it is all good. I was just thinking another kind of example that we can really hit this concept home that a lot of our listeners could relate to is being a student. I remember for me, in the beginning, you kind of just study you overly prepare and you overly consume yourself with the notes in the textbook, and you may say you get an A on the first test, and then now you think you have to do that much every single time to get that grade, and perhaps you don't, and that's the process I went through. I started realizing, I guess I don't have to spend 3 hours on this one, to study for this one exam. How about 45 minutes of just streamlined efficiency and getting the tendencies of the teacher? Okay, this is what the teacher said to focus more on rather than this, or this concept here. Make sure we understand this and how this relates to this. So you kind of study more specifics of what you're going to need to know. And then same thing as the gym. I remember many, many times other students, especially in grad school, they would talk about how, I studied for this exam for 5 hours over the weekend. And then someone else would say, oh my God, I only studied for 4 hours. Like, maybe I'm missing something. I'm not going to be as prepared. And it's just like we're talking about. You see someone on social media and they did 30 sets for chest, and you're thinking to yourself, oh my gosh, like, that's what I'm missing. Like, I'm not doing as much as that person. They got a bigger chest than me. And maybe the 5 hour study person is a straight A student. And now the B student is saying, gosh, I have to up my game here and study more hours. More hours is the answer. And just like the gym, like you either mature, I guess, or for me, I guess it's hard to overcome that. It's hard to take that risk and start taking things away. And I think in school, it started as I was forced to not study. I feel like something came up and I couldn't study as much as I wanted to. And I went into the exam like, well, what am I going to do? Like, this one ain't going to be a good one, but I'm going to go try anyway. And I ended up getting an A on the exam. And I said, that's interesting. And as that happens more and more, and you start proving that inner voice wrong, then I think that gives you the confidence to start analyzing how much of what you're doing is actually effective. And same thing with bodybuilding. And I'm by no means, I'm the perfect example of someone who knew more than I was implementing in my own training. And Jeff, you can attest to that. I was doing quite a bit of volume during my contest prep last year, and we kind of just said, all right, let's might as well just keep that up, like just ride that out for this prep. But then after prep, we're gonna take a lot away from this to help you recover. And that's just what we did. And I knew I should do that, but I guess I was just not afraid, but I just wanted to kind of keep it the same as what I've been doing. And so, yeah, I think, Jeff, you were a big kind of confidence booster to pull away from what I was doing. So I guess that may be a good place to take this. Like, what is that circumstance with my studying that forced me to not study as much and I still got an A? Or the Jeff Albert's telling me, like, Nick, that's cool what you were doing, but here's what we're going to do now, and you're going to feel a lot better. Like, what is that? What can that driving force be? If it's because I knew Eric Helms, I knew Brad Loomis, I knew Jeff Alberts, and I listened to all their content, and I became even friends with you guys, and I still didn't implement it until I had that one-on-one relationship with Jeff. So there is quite a bit of inertia that has to be overcome to do these things. So what do you think it was for you guys, and what do you think that could be for others?
Well, I've written a couple of blogs on this about my hero, Jeff Alberts, and how efficient
you guys
that he is in the gym. And really, to be honest with you, the epiphany that I had to answer your question, Jeff, was that, okay, well, you know what? Watching Jeff, a lot of times, he gets one good quality set in the same period of time that I get 2 crappy sets. And I was like, something's just not quite jiving here. Now, I need to really delve in here and kind of see, kind of why is that? What am I doing in the inefficiency department there? And I'm watching Jeff, and when you watch Jeff, first of all, every rep, there's solid effort. If he's using a 10 rep max, the first rep, there is solid effort. And then that eccentric is controlled. It is controlled on the eccentric. Every rep basically counts. So then I'm looking at kind of the way that I'm doing things, and I'm kind of like, okay, I'm gonna do a set the way that I do it, and I'm gonna do a set the way that Jeff does it. Luckily, I started the way that I did it, because basically I got the set done like I typically do. And I felt like I typically do, like I can do 3 or 4 more sets, right? So then I'm like, well, I'm going to do this set, the same load, everything's the same, but I'm going to do it the way Jeff does it. I'm just going to go ahead and do a lot more controlled eccentric. I'm going to make sure that, I'm putting maximum effort in on the very first repetition. And after that set, I felt like I had just done 4 of mine. Literally, I felt like I had just done 4 of mine. And from that moment on, it's been an evolution, right? And it's been something that, I'll be honest with you, I slip. I fall into my bad habits and I start doing kind of things the old Brad Loomis way. It takes a lot of focus. It takes a lot of discipline. And it just takes, for lack of a better term, you've got to commit. And you're going to screw up. You're going to fall into your old habits. You're going to lose focus sometimes in your sessions. Your brain kind of goes someplace else, and it's like, shit, I forgot to, you're halfway through the set, and you realize you're not doing things controlled like you committed to doing, right? But that was a big epiphany for me when it was like, I just did 1 set like Jeff Alberts, and I feel like I just did 4 sets of Brad Loomis way. You know what I mean? And after that, I committed. I was like, I am doing it this way from now on, And that's where really it was like, that is efficiency right there. I'm getting more done with less time spent, but with more effort. You know what I mean? So, Jeff, I just built you up on a pedestal, my friend.
I got to try to beat that.
Start dropping some words of wisdom, my brother.
I got to think of how to use my words more efficiently now. Let's see. I kind of look at, like if you're trying to dig a tunnel through a mountain, right? Like we need this train to go through this mountain. We got to dig this tunnel. So oftentimes as bodybuilders, we think we need to dig through that tunnel all at once. Because that's our mindset as bodybuilders, right? Like, especially when we're younger, we want to get to that elite status like yesterday. Like we're always in a rush. We want as much progress as possible. But the thing is that we're not like this machine that can dig through a mountain in like 2 days. We have basically a pickaxe, Okay, it's like, okay, how many times are you going to strike that pickaxe without your hands getting torn up? Or you break the pickaxe, right? If you break the pickaxe or you tear your hands up, guess what?
You're done. You're stopped.
You're not digging anymore.
Exactly.
So you have to learn as a bodybuilder, especially when you're younger. It's hard to do this because it's easy for me to say it with 37 years of training experience. Like, bro, you got 37 years ahead of you, right? It's like when you're young, you don't have that wisdom that comes with age and with experience. So you're just in a hurry. You want to get there to yesterday. So you have to really learn how to kind of look from a bigger perspective and realize like to get through that mountain, to dig that tunnel with the tools that you're equipped with right now, it's only so much you can do in a day. You have to find that sweet spot. And oftentimes that sweet spot isn't doing 5 or 6 sets in exercise. It's more like, hey, maybe it's like 2, maybe it's 3, maybe 4. Like that's a sweet spot. Good hard strokes, right? Like enough effort to where you're stimulating that muscle, but not so much where you're ripping your hands up, you're ripping your joints up, and at the end of the day, after you've dug maybe a few hours, not 10 hours, like, the auto plant wants you to work 9, 10 hours. No, let's work 4 hours. That's good, man. That'll give me a nice little chunk there with good quality. And then I'm able to recover from that. And then I dig the next day. Well, 37 years later, I got a nice train running through there. And it's running through there every single day. It's commuting a lot of people through there. So you're basically like a lot of volume over time is what you're collecting. But we don't look through that perspective. We look in too acutely. And I think that's where people get in hot water because we start following people on social media, and oftentimes what's being pumped out is more like acute way of thinking, as opposed to like looking at it through like an old guy like me, older fella like me, where it's like, okay, I've been doing this for a very long time, and you can basically accumulate a lot of gains over time, but then maintain, like when you get into your 40s and 50s, like muscle doesn't all of a sudden start to disappear overnight. I'm still doing it. Like right now, I can do probably less and I'd still maintain the physique that I have now, because no training at all is what's going to create atrophy. And that's what I always remind myself. Like if I go on vacation for a week or whatever, it's like if I don't train for a week, like nothing's going to happen. Like it takes 3, 4, 5 weeks with no training at all where you would see atrophy. So from that perspective, it's like, okay, so if I'm not being like doing a ton of volume, all the time, like I'm okay. Like your baseline is just kind of just doing this. It's just going up and down all the time. So I think people just like need to realize, like, just take that big step back. And if you kind of do that and you just tell yourself, like, I'm going to be okay if I have to reset my training baseline, if I have to lower it down for now, if anything, if you are coming from a place where maybe you've been inefficient, and usually when you're inefficient, that means you're either doing too much or doing too little. And more times than not, as bodybuilders, we're doing too much.
Too much.
So what's going to happen? Your fatigue level is probably going to drop off. Your overall stress levels will probably drop off. And therefore, the work that you're now doing, it's less than it was, but it's probably going to be highly more effective and highly more efficient.
Mm-hmm.
And you're probably going to enjoy it that much more because you're feeling a lot better. But that's the end of my mountain story.
Yeah, you basically
like
just touched on exactly what I experienced.
Yeah, I think what I'm taking from that, Jeff, is number one, it's a marathon, not a sprint, right? And
Exactly.
training is something where it's not like more is better. Like there are some things where more is better. Like if you're in one of those like tubes with all the money floating around, like yeah, like more is better in the moment. There that the more you have that stimulus, the more benefit you're gonna get from it. Training is not like that. Brushing your teeth is not like that. If you brush your teeth really hard for a week, you're not going to make up. You're not going to have beautiful teeth in 50 years. Like it does. All you have to do is just do the minimal that you have to do over the long term. A garden, right? If you water the garden 30 times a day versus twice a day, you're probably going to kill it if you water it too much. Just like someone in the gym. But there is a cap here where more is not better, and that's something that I think social media and just the motivation and Rocky training montage, like that whole thing kind of sets us up for failure. It's teaching us to brush our teeth for 30 minutes a day or water our gardens for 30 times a day. And then I think the other thing that I'm thinking of is what is the reward? Like what is the result of becoming more efficient? And for me, it wasn't that my physique drastically changed. I mean, I was starting an off season, so yes, my physique drastically changed, but that's probably more just because I'm in an off season. But the result, because think about this, if we say we sell people on this efficiency thing and people start getting more streamlined in their training, there's got to be some, oh, I see, or now I get it, and yes, this is a better way. There has to be some reward or result, positive result in the end. For me, it's just time. It's just I could sleep longer. I train first thing in the morning, very early before the day starts. I could just sleep a little longer, or if I have to make up a training day because something came up that day, I don't have to have a whole afternoon to train. I know it's going to be just an hour and 20 minutes, so I can squeeze that in here and there. So for me, it just allowed me more freedom and less of like this daunting task that had to be done every day. And that there's just no turning back. Like I would never have it any other way now, because now if I go back the other way, I'm taking time from my girls, I'm taking time from my wife, I'm taking time from my business, I'm taking time from anything else, from sleep, right? That was a big thing for me, was just trying to find the hours in the day to sleep and still get all my volume. And so,
hey 3DMJers, this is Andrea Valdez popping in to let you know about the Vault Quick Start Guide. As many of you guys have heard me talk about a bajillion times, the 3DMJ Vault is our online education platform full of video courses to help you become the best lifter, dieter, competitor, and overall athlete, I guess, that you can be. At the time of this podcast release, we have a total of 19 video courses included in the Vault VIP membership, And our 20th one on how to create a training split or microcycle will be released later on this summer. It's so good. Tons of videos, of course, and a spreadsheet that's like customizable and all that jazz. So anyways, coming soon. But as this platform continues to grow and expand over time, we thought it'd be helpful to offer some direction and guidance on how to proceed effectively and efficiently through the material. So that's why we created this new Vault Quick Start Guide. It includes a glossary of terms, a suggested order of course progressions depending on your goals, and approximate time estimates on how long it typically takes an athlete to learn and master each skill set presented. And it's totally free. Just go to 3dmjvault.com, sign up for a free account by entering your email address, and take a look through the chapters to see which learning pathway would be best for you. Whether you're a complete blank slate beginner, a future competitor, a current competitor, or an advanced athlete who wants to take it to that next level, there's a recommended order of tools and video courses provided so you can see what our coaches think would be most meaningful for your continued progress and success. Again, that's 3dmjvault.com to view the entire Vault Quick Start Guide completely free. Thank you so much for listening to our podcast, and we look forward to seeing you in the vault.
What do you guys think the rewards are? Like, I guess physique changes or more time, or what have you guys seen with yourselves or with your athletes?
For me, it was my health and my recovery more so than anything. Because I went through a long period of time where I was training my unknowingly, keep in mind, I was training my arms way too much. And essentially what it led to was my elbows were constantly hurting. And specifically, it was kind of like my brachioradialis. That muscle was always inflamed. It was always pissed off. And so I could train, but I couldn't do any curls. I could not do any direct bicep work, because that muscle would just kill me. And then eventually it would kill me so bad that then I started affecting other things. I couldn't low bar squat. I couldn't bench, and et cetera, et cetera. So then I kind of had to find a way, well, you know what? I can train, but I just can't do bicep curls for a while, So, I mean, I was training my biceps through elbow flexion on rows and pull downs and things like that, but there was no direct work. So you can imagine that, Brad's biceps didn't look too good there for quite a long time, because I literally could not do curls. It would affect the entire program, and pretty soon Brad couldn't really train at all. And then I kind of found out, like I just told you guys, my little epiphany, it's kind of like you can do more work in less sets if you just arrange the work in that set, a little bit differently. And so once Brad's elbows were healthy, I kind of started having a little bit more of an efficient mindset in the set itself, and actually increasing the effort. There were two sets I started with a week, direct bicep work. We're good. Let's go do a little bit more. Then it was 3 sets of direct bicep work. Did that for about 3 weeks. Yeah, you know what? Let's do it for a little bit more, So then it was like kind of 3 sets and a Myo-rep set, Well, that's working. That's not tearing Brad up, And guess what? About that time, Brad's biceps kind of started looking a little bit better, Took about 12 or 15 weeks, But now it's like, oh, look at that peak is starting to show up again. Oh, there's that split right there that I haven't seen in the year that I had to take off from doing direct bicep work. So for me, it was really the reward was that I could do curls again. Now, could I do 9 sets of direct bicep work a day, and 3 of those being these heavy cheater hammer curls with 70-pound dumbbells? No. It was 30-pound dumbbells.
Come on, Brad. You should be able to do that.
It's soft.
Yeah.
Soft.
You're not hardcore. Come on. You must be the holistic 3DMJ crew. That's what you are.
But yeah, the days of Brad doing cheater hammer curls with 70-pound dumbbells is long since gone, especially since I found out that with smarter instead of harder ways of working it, Brad's biceps look just as good, if not even a little bit better at 50 years old. So yeah, it was literally health and recovery that was the reward for me. And of course, physique eventually. But you have to commit. I had to do it. I had to commit for that 14, 15, 12 weeks, whatever it was that I ended up kind of going through that whole process.
I'm like you, Nick.
Jeff didn't get a reward. He's just always been on it.
Well, as a coach, I get a lot of satisfaction, when I have athletes, come down from like inefficient work to more efficient work, and you see the benefits of like their process with it. And I think it's hard to say like, oh yeah, you're going to get a lot more gains because you're lowering your overall workload down. Like that could be a possibility, but I can't say with certainty like everybody's going to get that type of benefit. Oftentimes what I see is like by doing this, people don't lose progress. And if anything, it's kind of very similar. You know, it's hard to really discern if it's like faster, a little bit slower, what have you. But I've never seen one person actually like regress because we went from being inefficient to efficient, meaning they're now working with less work, but it's a higher quality work. And you think about like, you know, your connective tissue, you think about just the overall recovery, your overall mood, the time component, the time you're saved, your family benefits from it, you know, you're just in a sense like a happier person. You're more productive elsewhere besides the gym. Because I mean, you guys have probably gotten athletes that like, you know, they're just way overloaded with life in general. And then they're trying to like stay on top of this, like, you know, high volume program. And they're just like not a very happy person. Like there's a lot of resentment. They're still doing the training, but there's resentment behind it. And to me, it's like, it's just not a good thing for a lot of people. So if like I always try to like have my gym and life outside the gym, like in a nice balance, like
Harmony.
having a lot of harmony, because once things are a little haywire outside the gym, it can impact in the gym and then vice versa. So I want things to be as balanced as possible, but I think it's well worth like trying to aim for efficiency because just overall on the human side of things, I think you can be a much happier person. Now, there is a pet peeve that I have when it comes to this efficiency stuff, and I might be going on a tangent here, but this is the almost 52-year-old Jeff coming out now. Like, oftentimes I get perceived as being a minimalist, and that frustrates me because my aim is not to do as little as possible. That's never been my goal. My goal has been to be efficient. So I try to explain to people, so how is doing 3 or 4 sets of leg press with 600 pounds for 10 reps, like how is that being a minimalist? Like that is hard. Like 600 pounds moving it 10 times is hard. That's not like 200 pounds for 10 or 15 reps or doing 5 sets with 200 pounds. Like you do hard 600 pounds, like it's going to be hard. That's not being a minimalist. That's being like trying to elevate my overall performance. So I'm trying to get efficient with that performance. And when it comes to being efficient with it, you got to be able to perform it, but you actually recover from it. So it kind of goes back to the supply and demand thing. So it's just, for me, it's very frustrating when I get labeled as a minimalist because that's not the goal. There's being a minimalist and being efficient is totally different.
Well, and that's, I can kind of somewhat relate because there was a period of time there where I was kind of labeled as the deload guy. You know, that's like that deload guy. He's always deloading. He's always talking about deloads and how to best deload. And it's kind of the same thing, you know. But my mind was always the same way. It was like, I'm not trying to get by with the least amount possible. I mean, I guess we kind of are in a way. But I'm thinking efficiency. I'm thinking about, I don't want to step in the gym with knowing what I can do. And today, what I'm doing today is so masked by fatigue that I can only do a quarter of what it is that I know. I don't want to train that way. I want to figure out ways to where basically I can step into the gym and on any given day, I can do 80, 85, 90, maybe even 95% of what it is that I know that I can do and that my potential is. I don't want to step into the gym anytime and say, how come I cannot press this weight today for 10 reps? Usually that's what I do. How come I can't do it today? You know, I hate that. Let's figure out ways to where that never happens. Or at least if it never happens, it only happens once or twice a year. You know, that's always my thinking is how can I get my performance in the gym the highest all the time? You know, and I can kind of, you can probably already tell that Jeff's tirade got me going on mine.
I'm just sitting over here. I don't think I'm a something guy yet. I mean, Jeff is the minimalist guy. Brad's a deload guy. I get some flack for saying multifactorial and using BFR in every conversation. Which it's funny. I don't use BFR in my own training, and I use it with like 2 patients that I have right now in my full-time job, and it's just, but yeah. So I don't know. Maybe someday I'll be some kind of guy. But no, I think that's really well said on from both you guys. And I guess one place we could take this is, how do we get efficient?
Right.
So if we're not efficient, I can use myself as an example just to kick off the conversation. So what we did was we just shaved sets off. We just capped it at 3 sets in exercise, and then we added a day to my week. I was doing 4 days a week, and then we added 1 more day, which was kind of like takes me like 25 minutes to get through, just an extra like back day, because we were going to try to focus a bit more on my back in the off season. So then we were able to take some volume out of the middle of my week for back anyway, put it on that extra day, and then shave other exercises down to 3 sets. I'm still training 1 rep shy of failure with Jeff Albert's like form. I do train very like meditative, similar to that. I don't blast music. I'll have a podcast on, but really just kind of get in my head and focus on the movements. So really for me, I'm still taking it close to the house, still going through same exercises, because I do train at home. So that's another way that we have to be efficient, is when we're training in a boiler room. How do we get most creative and most efficient with our equipment that we have with us? So split squats, heel elevated squats, RDLs, the basic barbell movements, and then some accessory stuff. But so for me, it was just cutting off a set or 2, because some movements I was doing 5 sets, and most movements I was doing 4 sets. I was doing a lot of supersets because I was trying to get it all in very quickly. And I'm still doing a couple supersets, but not like I was. And I'm doing them more just because, why not? Because I don't like standing around doing nothing. Whereas in the past, I was doing them because, holy cow, I have 15 more minutes before I have to go take a shower to get ready for work. I got to superset these exercises. And they were like barbell squats and pull-ups, not like biceps, triceps. Like those are the kind of things I was supersetting just to kind of cram it all in. So now the only supersets I really do are like knee extension, leg curl, and biceps, triceps, and everything else is just kind of straight sets, taking a break after each set, and then going at it again, and again capping it at 3 sets. So that's what it was for me. But I'm sure everyone's different. Some people may just be using too many intensity techniques, or going beyond failure, or using too many taxing exercises, like fatiguing exercises. So what do you guys think? How do we, what are some other options other than my example? Like, how can we get more efficient?
Dick, you literally read my mind, because that's exactly where I wanted to take this conversation. In fact, I can go ahead and cross strategies off of my list here of where I want this to go. So I'm going to cross that off now. Notice I'm using my left hand. See, Jeff's wearing off on me.
Yes, it. Darn, this means I don't get no more pet peeves to get out, huh? We have to actually say something productive now to help people become more efficient. All right, let's do it.
But yeah, that's exactly where I wanted this to go, with strategies. How can we do this? And bodybuilding, just like everything else, fashion, it's cyclical. It's kind of like we see things kind of come into favor. Everybody's doing them, and then they kind of lose favor, and then you don't hear about it, and then it kind of comes back in again, right? And when we talk about like DC training and myo repetitions, that was something that it seemed like everybody was doing about probably, 1 year, 2 years ago, something like that. And that's a great way, in my opinion, to kind of keep the density of your training up and consolidate time. Okay, normally I do 4 sets to failure, of whatever exercise. Well, you know what? We can kind of cut down on the time on that, and we can kind of keep up the effort that's there. Let's just kind of do 1 set to failure, and then let's just do 3 cluster sets, right? That's a great way to keep that training density in there, and not use super heavy loads for everything. You can just use moderate loads and sometimes light loads, And if you're keeping everything kind of close to that high effort kind of failure with that lighter weight, It's a great way to manage your body's fatigue and the fatigue on those muscles that you're working and still keep the training quality high. Myo-reps have kind of gone away. You don't see too many people doing that, but what's everybody doing right now? They're doing lengthened partial repetitions. Everything is kind of like lengthened partial repetitions, right? And that's actually a pretty good way to go as well, kind of take a set to failure, right? And then once you've kind of can't come to failure, well, then let's just do a few partial repetitions post failure, right? You just got basically just as much training in 2 sets or sometimes even 1.5 sets. You feel super intense because you're grunting and spitting and making all kinds of noises as you're trying to get those.
That's not a lot of poise, Brad.
You're right. It's not a lot of poise, but
no.
Brad is hardly
Let's
poised.
not have people spitting and all over the equipment and passing around germs.
That's
That's
another
good
reason.
at home, but
That's
yeah,
why I train at home. I can spit all over my walls.
So I know when I get to your house, I'm bringing a bottle of cleaner and a rag with me.
But probably some air freshener too. So, but it feels super intense when you take a set to failure and then do some lengthened partial repetitions. You just did 2 sets. And you know what? I guarantee you're going to felt like you trained when you got done doing that.
That's what I've been doing with mine because I'm trying to get more in the trenches experience with the partials.
Mm-hmm.
And that's how I've been kind of doing it. It's like, okay, just taking my normal sets, full range of motion, once I'm kind of like dead in the water. And then I'm like, okay, let me do a few partials here to kind of finish it off. And usually it's like the last set, I'll do that. So if I'm, let's say, doing 4 sets on something, I'll just do 3 with the last set with the partials.
Exactly.
Or if I'm
That's
doing
what
3
I do.
sets, I'll do 2. This past week, what I've been doing is like let's say I'm doing 3 traditional sets, I'll do 2 normal sets, and then the third one just strictly partials.
Mm-hmm.
Just kind of getting some experience with it. Of course, I don't have like knowledge one way or another if I'm seeing any benefits from it, but at the very least, I know I'm not regressing. I'm still training. I'm still taking that muscle to failure or close to it. So I'm getting a stimulus. But yeah, it's like, yeah, you could definitely condense some time down.
Mm-hmm.
For sure.
Well, and anecdotally, I can kind of say that, some of my kind of late novice, early intermediate bodybuilders that have never done this before, when I'm really trying to consolidate their training and increase the efficiency of their work, it takes a while. It takes a good, probably 4 months, a good 16-week macro cycle of training. But sometimes I can kind of see some changes there. I'm not going to say they look bigger, but there's some definite changes there while all things otherwise, kind of being fixed, and I mean, right now I'm just digging it, And another thing, I posted up on Instagram the other day, I took 2 sets to, I'm not going to even say it was failure. I called it an RPE 8. It was 2 reps in reserve for sure. And it was like the first rep that it just barely visibly slowed down. And Jeff, you kind of put a little bit of a comment on it that was very, very well said. But anyways, point being is I did 1 set, very traditional, got 8 repetitions, felt pretty good, right? I did a second set where I just slowed the eccentric way down. This is something that I like to try to get a lot of my late novice bodybuilders to start doing when they have not, done this before. And guess what? I got 7 repetitions, but the sets actually took like, I think 3 or 4 seconds longer, right? And that 1 set, at least to me, it felt, a little bit more intense, felt a little bit more effective than if I had done several sets of kind of the traditional, more kind of repetitions that you typically see. So yeah, I've even kind of gone so far as to kind of cut down on a lot of my sets and just slow the eccentrics way down, because they do feel like more work with less repetitions and pretty equal time. You know what I mean? As far as all the sets kind of put together, in one session, 3 sets versus 4 sets, because those 3 sets, they just took a teensy bit longer. And so they kind of take the same period of time as 4 sets, you know what I mean? But they feel much more efficient. And my body's, kind of liking it a little bit more. So yeah, those are kind of some strategies. There's others that I'm probably sure I'm going to think of when we're done recording this podcast, but
so
drop some
I
knowledge.
think for me, like it's not like all of a sudden, like I learned all these strategies and now I'm efficient. Like it's been an evolution, right? Of going through all these training years. And the one thing that I kind of played around with was eliminating some of the direct work on some of the smaller body parts. Like, let me not do direct rear delt work. Let me not do direct trap work. As an example, let me not do direct ab work. I know some people are going to like, oh my gosh, you're not going to grow those muscles. But they're like, the way I kind of thought about it was, okay, my rear delts, they're assisting in my back work. My traps are assisting in my back work. My abs, I mean, they're locking up basically almost every exercise that I'm doing. Otherwise, my spine's going to be all over the place. So I'm like, okay, if I'm being more effective performance-wise, like if I'm getting my rows up, my pull downs are going up, for example, like those muscle groups are assisting in that. That's like Kobe tossing up the ball for Shaq. You know, he's getting the assist. So I played around with that. Like I trained those body parts directly all the way until my late 30s. So we're talking 20 years of like rear flies, shrugs, like, and you know, my physique, it is what it is at that point. And then I eliminated all that together after my I think it was like 2010, 2011. And I got on stage 2011, 2014, you know, without doing direct work on those. And my physique improved. I'm not saying it's because I didn't train those directly, but I had a lot of my other variables in order. It was multifactorial, like Nick likes to say. But what I'm saying is like, because I was still training them indirectly, it was still effective. So it's not like because I'm not doing a rear fly, all of a sudden my rear delts are just going to disappear. If I'm pulling more weight on my rows, my pull downs, like they're getting the assist, the volume is elevating from that new baseline, because not doing indirect work, I'm just resetting a baseline. So it's going up from there. And I just saw like nothing but positivity from it. Well, now I don't have to do 25 exercises in my programming. Now I'm only doing 9 to 12 exercises in my programming. And again, here's those people out there, Jeff's a minimalist. He's only doing 9 to 12 exercises, but it wasn't me purposely saying, I want to cut it from 25 to 12 because I'm trying to get away with less. It's like, how can I be just as effective, you know, by being more efficient?
Yeah. And I'm pretty sure, Jeff, I am pretty sure, to take a bit of, put on my science hat, my Eric Helms hat, in evidence, they count rear delts on all of your back work because they are contributing. So if you do 3 sets of lat pull downs, that's 3 sets of rear delts. They actually count it that way. I am like 90% sure. And to be honest with you,
yeah, go ahead.
That's how I calculate all of my clients' training. If you're doing 9 sets of lats, you're doing 9 sets of rear delts. And you just kind of did it intuitively. You didn't need to read something in order for you to figure that out. You just figured it out on your own.
Well, I remember back, I forget what year it was. Maybe it was like in the early 2000s. I bought the Strength Training and Anatomy book. Have you ever guys seen that book before? It's just illustrations of the exercises.
Yeah, and they're all colored and everything. Yeah.
And it shows like what, you know, every exercise, what musculature is being hit. So I just looked at those pictures and looked at the book with the illustrations. I'm like, okay, that works this, this, and this. So just having like somewhat of a foundational, you know, understanding of like
of anatomy,
what does what, like it gave me a sense of security in making that change.
Yeah.
And then what I did in 2011 for Peak Week before the Pro International, actually 2014, actually, the week of that show, like I never train without a shirt on. I just don't like to do it. Even at home, I'm like, I don't like to take my shirt off and train like that. Like, you know what? Screw it, man. I'm in the best shape of my life right now. I'm going to take my shirt off. I'm going to train. I'm going to put it out there. So you can literally see, like, because I was so lean, like what was working in each of the exercises. When I was doing a tricep press down and I filmed it from the front, you literally could see my chest fibers just like every time I push down, you get a little bit of the chest contraction, chest firing. My abs looked like just like a rock the entire time.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that just gave me extra validation that these things are being worked indirectly. And it's not like I'm training easy on those movements. I'm still pushing it as hard as I can on that press down. So if I'm using more weight or doing more reps on a press down, what do the abs have to do? They have to work just as hard
to keep your
maintain
posture.
that elevated performance.
Yeah.
So to me, it's
Yeah.
like the indirect work has a lot of merit. And I remember even on a YouTube comment, this one guy's like, what do you mean the press downs work the abs? Doesn't work your abs. So long story short, he emailed me about, or yeah, was it email or message, whatever it was. Like, I think it was like 7-8 years later, he apologized. I thought that was really cool. Like this guy is like, really, really humble enough to kind of come back later in time and then apologize.
Yeah.
But I
Yeah.
mean, again, it's just like I put a high value on indirect work. I mean, you look at other sports too. It's not like they're doing like, hey, I got to do rear delt work. It's like, rowers, for example, right? Swimmers, like you see their backs developed and they're not like specifically targeting these muscles.
Mm-hmm.
Not saying that there's no value in doing that. Like obviously if you have, you're deficient in some muscle groups like that, you need more attention to it. But what I'm saying in general, like you can become more efficient by removing some of these indirect exercises or
Yeah.
direct
And see,
exercises rather.
I kind of found that out the hard way. I found out that really trying to improve my back, my lats, and doing basically 20 sets of pulls that involved elbow flexion, along with 9, 10, 11 direct sets of bicep work, pissed my elbows off to the point to where I couldn't do direct bicep work at all. Not knowing that basically what I was doing was 30 sets of biceps. Now, granted, the elbow flexion on pulls is not working the biceps directly as hard as as direct bicep work is. You're never going to convince me of that. But what I did find out is that I can keep doing 20 sets of pulls on lats and do 2 sets of biceps, direct work, and I'm going to get just as good of results, if not better, than doing all of this direct bicep work. Because
especially
there is a
if you're
contributing factor.
realizing like I'm digging with a pickaxe to get through the other side of the mountain over time, not all at once.
Exactly. I'm not trying to get all through there yesterday, break the pickaxe, break my hands, and I have to stop doing my biceps for like 6 months.
I just realized what we're doing here. We're taking work away from Nick is what we're doing.
I'm just watching the dollars fall through my fingers in my tube of money that I'm trying to catch here. So I appreciate that for you guys preaching this workload balance capacity whole thing here. It's very similar to the principles that I preach to my patients and athletes all the time. Jeff, the Anatomy of Training book, this was before Instagram could have a graphic or as some kind of moving anatomy body with muscles during exercises so you can see what's working. That book, I think, really set me up for mind-muscle connection. Like there was something about seeing that illustration during a dumbbell press or during a fly and having the pecs red and or like in the pressing movement, the pecs should be like red and the triceps would
red
be blue.
And the indirect, like the secondary muscle group would be like yellow or orange or whatever it was. Yeah. So like for me personally, I'm visual. I'm more of a visual learner. Like I love Eric, don't get me wrong, but sometimes when he uses the big words and he's describing like the humerus moves in this direction, I'm like, okay, I need to see that. Like, I just need to see it. So that book just really helped me out a great deal.
And that honestly set me apart from other people in physical therapy school. Because in physical therapy school, when we had to learn the humerus moves and rotation to this, I already had 90% of it in my head, burned in my head from training. My other classmates were trying to learn what the lats did. And I'm like, hold on. What do you mean? You need to think of an acronym of what the lats do. Like I've known what the lats do and what they look like from watching Kai Green for the past like 10 years and just training. Like, so I went into physical therapy school with so much more than I thought just because of having that knowledge. So it's 100% true. That book was really something special. So I think one of the last things that I want to talk about is, and we kind of touched on it before we started recording. Everyone everyone has their own lives and their own responsibilities and their own hats that they wear and roles that they play. And in the beginning of this episode, I said we don't really need to be efficient until we have to be. What happens when you have someone who thinks they need to be super efficient, but maybe they don't? When a high school senior comes into my office and tells me that they don't have time to do something, or they don't have time to do a home exercise program, or I get it. I get that being 18 has its trials and tribulations, but gosh, do we really need to narrow your training to 20 minutes 3 times a week because you don't have time? Like, do you guys ever see efficiency being taken too much? And maybe we can look elsewhere. So an analogy
That's
would be
being
like,
a minimalist.
I'm not.
That's
So,
being a minimalist.
A really good analogy that I like to use a lot is if someone's struggling financially and they're looking for ways to get themselves in the green. If they look to their Starbucks coffee in the morning, maybe it's $5 or $6, and they focus on taking that out. Okay, if I take that coffee out, then that'll be that X amount of dollars per month, X amount of dollars per year. They feel like that hit a dopamine because they did something and they're moving toward their goal of being financially stable. But is that really the where you want to be putting your time? Is it the Starbucks, or is it the $200 Amazon purchase in bed on your phone before you go to sleep? Like, that's I think where efficiency, this conversation can go with some people that think that they need to be too efficient, is maybe it's not the gym or training that we need to make more efficient. Maybe there's other things outside of the gym that you can modify. And just kind of talking it out now, many times in my office with not weightlifters and general population, but even with bodybuilders and powerlifters, sometimes all the focus is on what we do in the office and what we do in the gym. And it's, I think, if we change an exercise in treatment one day, they'll come back 2 days later and say, I think that exercise made my back hurt. Okay, but that exercise was real small compared to the past 2 days of activities that you did, or just living on planet Earth for 2 more days. And even in the gym, sometimes if something's painful, we need to look outside the gym. And what are we doing in the 22 hours outside of the gym that are affecting our pain or our time management skills? There was a TED Talk, I forget who the woman was, but she was using someone as an example. And I don't know if there was a time management book or blog or something that she read. And someone was planning their route to work, so they only had to make right turns to save time. So they didn't have to wait for traffic to go by and then make a left turn. And she was thinking that the point of her talk was that if you are trying to optimize turns to work, you need to look elsewhere, because there's no way someone is that busy. I mean, Jeff Bezos got in the best shape of his life, right? Like, he's jacked now. So even he found time to do these things. So I don't know. What do you guys think about, do you ever get people that need to always try to make things too efficient? Everything's a superset. Everything is I don't have time for 2 sets. I'll do a Myo-rep set of this and then a superset of that. And then I'll do cardio on my way out of the gym. Like, how do you have those kind of conversations with people?
Yeah. And some of it, Nick, kind of goes back to your conversation that you talked about before. Once something works, I'm just going to keep doing it. Whether there's a better way out there and there's a better wheel, I'm just going to keep doing what works. And so you don't know, for example, I have a lot of people that they have to have this food at this period of time prior to their training session. And if they do that, every training session is good. Every training session is good, right? And I'm like, well, is it really that food at that time that's making your training good? Or is it the fact that you just sleep like a rock? Total tangent here. How the hell does Alberto Nunez sleep like he does? How the hell does he do that? I wish I could sleep as good as that man does. But point being, maybe that is what's making your training really good, and not the fact that you're having a banana, 2 tablespoons of peanut butter, exactly 94 minutes and 30 seconds before your training. Maybe, you know what, you could just kind of let that go, not waste that 94 minutes waiting for that to all digest perfectly and to be assimilated into your body to make your training session perfect. Maybe just go ahead and have a apple and some water. Have that like 30 minutes before your training session. Find out. Try it. If nothing else, what are you going to be out? 1 or 2 training sessions. Boom. Guess what? My training was just as good. Aha. You know what? Causation? That's not correlation. You just found out that it had nothing to do with what it was that you were doing. It's actually something totally different. And you just eliminated an hour from your day that you've got to wait what you thought was the most effective way to do things, you know? And so I think just have an open mind, you know, just look at what other people doing. Jeff Albert's guy, he's a total minimalist, but guess what? What he's doing is working. You know what I mean? Maybe I need to kind of take a little bit of Brad Loomis's book, page out of his book, and look at what Jeff's doing and actually commit and try doing these things before I just start thinking that, yeah, you know what? It works for him, but it can't possibly work for me, you know, or it's go hard or go home. You know, it's things like that that aren't even in the gym that are things that you can do because you're too focused on one thing instead of, like Jeff talked about before, just getting that wide angle lens on and getting the bird's eye view of the whole forest. That's a coniferous forest. I don't care that there's one deciduous tree right there where I'm looking and focusing on, you know what I mean? That's a coniferous forest. And so, yeah, that's kind of the things that I like to kind of always keep in mind. And that's kind of why I set up my clients' logbooks the way that they are. I like to kind of see a little glimpse of everything and not just, boom, what happened right there in your training session. I want to see where that training session kind of lied with your life and how it outlined with your high days. There was a cardio session. There's a bad night's sleep, you know, those kind of things like that. Uh-oh.
Those are some big words. I was like pretty impressed. I might do some good quality sets, but man, yeah, that's pretty good brain power there, Brad. I'm proud of you. But Nick, I think yeah, so stuff outside the gym, like I'm going to use my wife an example. Hopefully she doesn't listen to this podcast.
Jeff, we started this saying we had to keep our wives happy.
I
Rule
know.
number one.
I know.
Rule number one.
I know, but I mean, it's because you know, when you of course I have athletes, but you don't see 24/7, right? I live with my wife. I see 24/7, right? So she's going to be a good example. And the thing is she'll say, I don't give a shit, because she's very comfortable in her own skin. That's why I love her. But anyways, and I'm not perfect either. I have my flaws, and I'm sure she can come on the podcast and probably say a lot of things.
Future podcast, the wives.
We usually try to cap it at an hour and a half, hour and change. So yeah, I don't know if.
But you know me, I've been hashtagging Instagram. I haven't been doing any other hashtag but keep it real. Like, so this is what we're gonna do. We're keeping it real. So literally, she has to leave the house by 7:20 for work, right? And she's a teacher, so she has to make sure she's on time. So she'll get up. It's like 5:30. She'll get up, have her coffee, sit on the couch. Which is fine. You know, have your coffee on the couch really quick, watch the news or whatever. But then she'll get on Netflix, and now she's watching shows. And I'm like, okay, I'm gonna go do my cardio, right? So I get on my bike, I take off. You know, I come back 70 minutes later, and she's rushing for work. Stressed, rushing, she's leaving late. So I think just that small example, like I think a lot of us that are listening to this can probably relate to that. And then you get to the gym wondering why you're rushing. Well, it's probably something similar to that. So I think, yes, Nick, to what you're kind of saying earlier, I think there's probably people out there that don't really necessarily need to be more efficient in the gym. They need to be more efficient with their time and the decisions that they're making throughout the day. And I'm guilty of this too. You know, I've missed a session or here or two over the last 37 years because I got caught up in a show or I'm doing something else. It's like, it just happens. Like, we're all human. But I think when it becomes like when you're doing it repetitively, consistently, it's a problem at that point. So it's like maybe you just kind of sit back and look at like, okay, what am I doing throughout the day? How can I be more efficient with just my daily tasks where it does free up? Like you've been rushing 45 minutes in the gym every time. Like maybe you free up some time elsewhere and now you have an hour and 15, which even 10 minutes more in the gym can make things a lot more serene in the gym, a lot more calm and collected. Because I don't know about you guys, but when I feel like I'm pressured and rushing in the gym, the quality of my work goes down.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like, yeah, just kind of like analyzing like what you're doing throughout the day and, maybe trying, ways to get more efficient elsewhere could go a long ways towards your bodybuilding. Same thing on nutrition too, right? It's like, I know I shouldn't really eat this right now, but it's only a couple hundred extra calories. And you kind of wonder why you're not really getting as much out as out of your bodybuilding. If it's a fat loss phase.
Mm-hmm.
If you're eating a couple hundred calories extra a day, by the time you're done with your diet, you could have been 5 pounds leaner. So it's just finding ways to be more efficient, not just in the gym, but outside as well.
Well, and I'm totally guilty of this. I finally had to just cut off scrolling on social media. I
Oh yeah,
would
right.
scroll and scroll and scroll and scroll, and pretty soon, son of a bitch, I was supposed to train like 30 minutes ago. I totally lost track of time.
Yeah, you're not the only one. There's sleep too, right? Like you probably have a lot of athletes go, "Oh, my sleep, I'm not getting enough sleep." Well, they're scrolling, or they're on Netflix, or they're playing video games.
Yeah.
I had one athlete that was playing video games like way too much, lack of sleep, and just not really doing what they're supposed to do on the bodybuilding side of things because they got caught up with the video games.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So I think that's. It's not talked about too much. I don't think I've seen it too much. Like this topic of conversation, like being more efficient just with your real life
time, to
help your bodybuilding out.
Yeah, I know that's one thing I had to do. I had to just like stop. I had to put it down and I'm not even paying attention to that for a while. And I found out there was a lot of fat that was trimmed there.
Yeah. So yeah, I think that like Nick, I think that is definitely valid. That probably happens quite a bit.
Yeah.
One place that I kind of want to take this conversation, I know that we're just over an hour here now, or getting up about an hour and 15 minutes. But when we talked about strategies, right? One thing, this is a Twitter post that I put up. People, they hear about these cool strategies and they want to try them, and either they incorporate them all at once. I'm doing Myo-reps, I'm doing lengthened partials, I'm doing overload partials, I'm doing all of this stuff all at once. It's like, you don't really have to do everything all at once, And then likewise, they bounce. I'm doing Myo-reps for a couple weeks. Then I'm going to do lengthened partials. Oh, look at there. Overload partials is the thing. Let's do overload partials, And maybe you guys can attest to this. And maybe Jeff, you can kind of talk about how you incorporated that. When you find those things, you just found a brand new way of periodization. Run a period of Myo-reps. Run 12 weeks of Myo-reps on these specific exercises that you want to run those on. And when that 12 weeks is done, guess what? Now you get to run 12 weeks of partials. There's another period. You can run partials on these muscle groups that you want to run. And then when that 12 weeks is over, you get to run 12 weeks of slow negatives or overload partials or whatever. You can be smart about these fun things without bouncing them in and out of your life or incorporating them all at once, right? And then once that's all done, either A, you can go back to Myo-reps again, or B, there's going to be something else out there that just came back around and you can do static holds or something like that. You know what I mean? But Jeff, how do you kind of work strategies like that with people?
I think the way I kind of look at that is there's a skill that's required of these things, right? Like, so if you're trying to just like, okay, I'm going to take, let's say, all traditional sets, throw them out the water, and now I'm going to do nothing but lengthen partials on these exercises. It could be just like too much at once from a skill component. So how effective are you really going to be? Like, maybe you are, maybe you're not. Maybe you're inefficient, right? Because you don't have the skill. So I would just say, like, kind of like what Nick talks about a lot is start slow, taper up, and then while you're kind of tapering up with the new thing, phase the old thing out at the same pace. So you're getting a smoother transition that way as opposed to just being very abrupt with it. Because I know for me, like incorporated, even when I started incorporating Myo-reps, it was only like, I'm only going to do this on push-ups. That was it. And I had to, like, I wasn't good at it at first. It took me about a month or so to kind of really get into the groove with it. And same thing with these partials. I'm still not like 100% confident with my skill level. I'm still trying to figure out, like, hey, what's the range of motion on my pec deck that I'm trying to hit? What's the range of motion on the leg extensions? What's the range of motion on my pull downs that I'm doing these on? Like, I'm still trying to figure that out and trying to standardize these things, because I think in the end, it's like so cliche, but consistency is always key. So I think that's the key to progress. And it's key, in my opinion, it's like, as far as like staying safe too, like not trying to overload like a bunch of partials and you're really don't have a skill for it. Like, you don't want to risk any type of injury or aches and pains.
When you didn't throw the baby out with the bathwater either. What you've been doing is working. You kept the majority of that in there, and just kind of added these little things,
like, like you talked about, I've seen a lot come and go, and it's cyclical. It comes back around.
Cyclical,
There's a reason I've trained for 37 years. There's a reason you've trained over 20 years. Same thing with you, Nick. You've been trained a long time. It's like, we do what we like to do. Like, you have to enjoy what you're doing. So I'm not going to, like, all of a sudden, because there's a shiny new toy out there, I'm going to toss out everything I've done for 37 years.
Yeah.
I'm going to toss it all out like there's no validity to it anymore. Like, I've been successful with some of the stuff that I've done. So it's like, to me, I kind of see this as like, okay, here's something that could be a bit more optimal than, what we've done in the past. But I see it as a tool. How do I do it? And when do I implement it? And that's basically what I'm trying to figure out now. So I just look at it as like anything like Myo-reps, BFR, straight sets, supersets, static holds, like all these things are just tools in a toolbox. So it's understanding, like, okay, what the job at hand, the context at hand, what tools is right for the job right now. And it's an evolution. You just continue to learn as you go.
Kind of depends on what your goal is too. I mean, am I really going to have powerlifters do slow eccentrics? Maybe, but not on everything. And there may be periods of time where it's very useful and it has a lot of utility. And there's going to be periods of time where it's not, so it kind of depends on the goal as well.
It's always like, is this going to be effective? And is it going to be efficient? I don't have nothing else to say. I want to keep the podcast efficient, not minimum. I don't want to minimize it, but we got to keep it efficient.
A podcast is very multifactorial when it comes to the length and the quality of it. No, I think this was good. I think we hit a lot of different topics here, a lot of different roads of efficiency that we could take. I think hopefully we kept our wives happy, and that's the main goal. But no, guys, I think this is very useful. Anything else? Any other final thoughts that you want to say?
Of course, we're talking about training and efficiency and programming. I could go on for days, but
we're talking about practice. That's what we're talking about. We're talking about practice, man. Are we really talking about practice? We're talking about efficiency, man.
Efficiency, yeah. But I do want to leave it with this for people that are looking for strategies and they're looking for, making things efficient. You know what? Like Jeff said earlier, there's nothing wrong with just kind of drawing a line in the sand and establishing a new baseline. Maybe what you need to do is, if nothing that you have ever done has helped your efficiency and you've never found like that perfect balance of efficiency and time and whatever, maybe you need to start with, I hate to use the term, a minimalist program, and then go from there. Maybe you need to start with the bare minimum that that you can complete every day, every week. You never miss a workout. You never miss a set. Start with a bare minimum program and then run that for a while and then add to it. Now, speaking from experience, I've done that with a lot of people, and guess what they found? Their training enjoyment went up. They actually enjoyed their training more. They actually found like all of their sessions were much more effective. They actually felt like they were getting more out of it, really, because they weren't rushing and doing all these other things that took away from their quality of their workout. So if you're really looking to have an effective strategy, back off a little bit, start with a minimalist program, And then like Jeff said, you ain't going to shrink. How many times has Jeff said that? It's probably the wisest words that I think I've ever heard. As long as you're training, you're not going to shrink. And then you can always go up from there and start using all these other things that we talked about. So that was the only other thing that I wanted to talk about. And yet I was still efficient.
I'm going to say one last thing. That's it. That's it. We hit stop on the microphones. We're talking about efficiency, man.
What's going on, everybody? Eric Helms here, Chief Science Officer of 3DMJ. Thank you for listening to the podcast. And let me just take 1 second to tell you about MASS, Monthly Applications in Strength Sport. This is a monthly research review that I do with Lauren Colenso-Semple, Eric Trexler, as well as Mike Zerdos. These are experts in their field, and we cover all the information relevant to you as an athlete or coach if you're working with strength or physique athletes, or if you're a recreational or competitive athlete yourself. We cover nutrition, training, sports psychology, and health. And we do this in written format, as well as, since you like the podcast, audio summaries, as well as video concept reviews. If you're a trainer, we also have continuing education credits for ACSM, NSCA, NASM, and ACE. So head over to 3dmusclejourney.com, click on the products tab, and you can find us there. I look forward to seeing you, and enjoy the podcast.